Yeah, sorry, hold on.
Yeah, it's always Nova though.
Rip.
I had a bird up
Oh,
till up
yeah.
until a few months ago. I don't. Snow is
Never
gone.
owned a bird before.
So let me try and pronounce the officer's name. Starship 21ZNA9.
Jesus Christ. That sounds like something you come up with like as a parody of a fanfic writer's username. Oh, I might just steal the TV tropes synopsis for it. You like synopsis for it?
All right then. So, are we recording, Harry?
Um,
All right then.
yeah, we should be good.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Storytime with Scrappy and Friends.
Hello,
I'm Scrappy
everyone,
Fan
and welcome
92, and with us today are Harry, Nova, and Tanner.
AKA the gang. See what I did there? Whatever. If
Yes.
Harry edited, I would love to have done the title card and
Everything here is raw, much like how I watch my anime.
oh, that's the joke you're going for. You know what? You went for something less low-hanging. I can respect your integrity.
Yeah.
So, Tanner, would you like to explain what we're reading today?
Today we are reading a fic based off of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which is, I believe, in its 18th season on a show on FXX. It is a sitcom about a group of friends. Half of them are related to each other because Frank Reynolds is the father of Dee Reynolds and Dennis Reynolds, and there is a one-off joke that implies that he's also Charlie's father. But it's about a group of friends who both frequent and run a bar in Philadelphia called Patty's Pub, and usually come up with get-rich-quick schemes or just schemes for their own personal gain that inevitably go wrong because they're all a bunch of sociopathic morons. And the best way to describe it, to steal from TV tropes, is that if Seinfeld and most sitcoms are about lovable jerks, this show is about genuinely terrible people.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Tanner. Yes, for today's episode, we are reading a story from that based off of Always Sunny. It is called Without a Foundation by Starship 21ZNA9. And Tanner's description of the show provides you what am I trying to say? Tanner's description is, from what I know, accurate of, oh my gosh. The show is shows the comedy. This story is a dramedy, I'd say.
It's weird, and from what I've read, it is weird because the gang do care about each other to some extent, but will inevitably backstab each other in nearly every episode.
Nice.
But it's weird. It's almost never portrayed as a positive thing. Like, it's essentially just codependence.
Lovely.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
It is, I would say, probably one of the darkest comedies. Definitely one of the darkest sitcoms allowed to air on TV. I'd put it up there with Malcolm in the Middle and debatably Fawlty Towers, but Fawlty Towers is more just sadistic than dark.
Oh dear. Well, the characters may generally screw each other over on a regular basis in the show, but for this story, they are facing something a bit unusual.
Yeah.
The summary of the story is Charlie dies. No, really, that's it. That's the plot. And that's actually the summary.
Yeah, and I can already say, if you wanted to evoke any sort of emotion, for these characters, Charlie would be the one you would have to kill, because he's probably the most sympathetic of the gang.
Mm.
He almost... It's weird, I wouldn't call him a good person, but he does come off as innocent and misguided a lot of the time.
Mm.
Yeah, actually, I guess I should provide just a brief character rundown for the uninitiated. Dennis, a self-appointed leader, complete psychopath.
Yeah.
Let's see. D, Dennis's twin sister, initially the closest thing to a voice of reason, now just kind of a attention-grabbing failed actress.
Yeah. Charlie, lovable idiot, creepy obsession with a waitress, has a very, very fucked up childhood.
Oh dear.
And, Mac is both a dude bro, or someone trying to be a dude bro, I'd say, but failing miserably. He's a closeted gay, a fundamentalist Christian. He's insecure about his masculinity. He wants to be a tough guy, but depending on... Okay, there are some episodes that imply he has some fighting skills, but it's usually whatever the joke they need to tell is.
He's as competent. He's competent if it means he can get to screw someone else over.
Yeah. There is a really fun... I can't just describe... I could do a top 10 favorite episode, but I like the one where it's them... There's a robbery, I think, in a convenience store, and it goes into their heads, and you figure out what they're all thinking they're going to do. Frank just goes for a sandwich and ignores it, and Mac envisions himself basically being in an action movie and stopping the robber.
So, yeah, and... Alright, those are the original four, and then there's Frank, Dennis and Dee's father, and... He's a rich asshole, that's kind of his thing.
He's an old person who decided he stopped giving a fuck, and now just kind of is actively trying to be a degenerate. He's like, I've only got a few years left. I'm gonna get real weed with it.
Oh no. So as you can guess, Tanner will be voicing Frank for this story.
I will. Rule number 35. Concentrate.
Oh dear. Nova will be voicing Dennis, and I will be voicing Mac and D. This is Without a Foundation by Starship 21ZNA9. Charlie had been dead nearly 2 days, and Dennis was on his 5th attempt at writing a eulogy. The words weren't coming out. Not like they should be. Any stray word that entered his mind felt wrong, was disconnected from anything that Charlie was. He couldn't write what he felt because he didn't really feel it. Charlie was dead. It was a fact that was floating on the outer edges of himself, and refused to settle beneath his skin. So he just stared in the fog at the blank pad of paper in front of him. Occasionally, he'd get a sentence or two out before scribbling over it and shredding the sheet. He shifted slightly on a stool and tapped the edge of the bar with his pen. He needed a drink. He stared at the shelves full of booze in front of him, but his legs wouldn't work. He just sat, eyes darting from the paper to the bottles. Patty's pub was closed. Had been since they had gotten back from the hospital and shut themselves inside. Frank had disappeared somewhere almost immediately. Every now and then, they would hear the faint sounds of shattering glass and pained, raging screams. Dennis guessed he was up in Charlie's bad room. Mac was slumped over in a booth. The table was covered in empty beer bottles. Dee sat across from him. They weren't speaking to each other, just passing drinks back and forth. Dennis kept his back to them. He ripped off another yellow sheet from the pad. This one didn't even have a single letter written on it. He started tearing it up anyway.
Somebody give me a beer.
His voice was raspy with disuse. Mac and Dee remained where they were. You're closer. Just get it yourself. That was Dee with none of her usual fight. Why don't you just give it a rest, man? We can deal with the eulogy later. There's other shit we need to do. Mac's voice was barely above a whisper. Dennis swung around in his seat.
Well, I don't see you just doing anything. I guess I gotta call the funeral home or whatever else you do when this happened.
I'll do the eulogy, dude. It should be me anyway. I was his best friend. Mac took another swig of beer.
First of all, that's debatable. Second of all, absolutely goddamn not. You are not getting up there. The last thing we need is you doing another goddamn rain dance.
Mac's eyes briefly flashed hurt and then grew narrow and dark. What did you say? Dennis wouldn't be intimidated. He met Mac's fury with a steely gaze.
You heard me.
Mac wrapped his hand around the neck of an empty bottle and hurled it at Dennis. It barely missed his head and crashed into the shelves behind him. Screw you! Mac tore himself out of the booth and stormed out of the bar. The door slammed behind him. Dennis shrugged at Dee.
Good riddance. I can't am screwing up this funeral anyway.
Screwing up the funeral? What the hell are you talking about? Nobody at Charlie's funeral is gonna give a shit if Max speaks, dances, or starts jerking off on the coffin. It's just gonna be us and his mom. That's it.
It's the principle of the thing, D. There's a way that things are done. And they do not include Mac making a goddamn asshole of himself.
Dee drew up her hands and stumbled to her feet. She walked unsteadily toward him until she was inches away from his face. Dennis could smell the beer on her breath as she whispered in his ear, "You're the asshole."
I don't mean to interrupt, but it is scary how you've never seen the show. Yet that is probably exactly how Caitlin Olsen would deliver that.
She backed away, looking satisfied with her statement, and headed toward the door.
What? Are you gonna follow him?
Shit, no! I'm going home. I don't want to see any of you bitches right now, okay? With that, she was gone. Dennis pretended not to hear her stumble and trip outside.
It's fine.
He muttered.
They're just distracting me and dragging this whole process down anyway. Goddamn them. We can't all just sit around and drink as much as we want to right now, okay? Okay. Some of us have to deal with all this shit and write stupid fucking speeches about our asshole friends who get themselves killed. God damn it, Charlie.
Dennis climbed over the bar and grabbed for the biggest bottle he could find.
Yeah, fuck you, buddy. I am drinking now.
He chugged as fast as he could and pushed images of Charlie out of his mind. The first time he ever saw him. Small and filthy and feral behind Mac as Dennis had bought drugs off him. Charlie's whoop of excitement when they bought patties. The look on his face when he realized Frank might be his father. Getting trashed together with Chase Utley and Ryan Howard. A million little moments. And the last one. Charlie laid out on a slab under a crisp white sheet. Face gray and lips blue. Silver spray paint stuck to his mouth. Drying vomit still running down his chin. Dennis was the only one to see him. The others had chickened out at the last minute. Even Frank, that bastard. He looked like a damn mess. Now the whole hospital knew that he was associated with a dead guy with puke all over his face. Dennis had used a corner of the sheet to wipe the vomit away. That was better. That was more presentable, he thought.
Jesus Christ, Charlie, what the hell did you do?
He said it to Charlie, not expecting an answer. The coroner told him anyway. All the drugs and alcohol in his system were finally too much for him. It looked like he passed out on his back and ended up choking on his own vomit. It struck Dennis as both fitting for Charlie and not nearly good enough for him. He felt blessedly numb as he gazed down at his friend. The feeling was sticking with him for now. It was getting him through, small outburst aside. That was just because Mac, Dee, and Frank weren't cooperating. They weren't doing what had to be done. They were falling apart. It was embarrassing, really. The bottle was empty. Remnants dribbled down his face, and Dennis coughed and let the warmth of it flow through him. The anger had subsided for the moment. What he needed was a change of scenery. He couldn't focus here. He collected his pad and pen and left without turning off the lights. Dee felt better now that she'd finally showered and brushed her teeth. She was still drunk, not drunk enough. There was a flask full of whiskey under her pillow, and that should be enough to knock her out for the next several hours. Sleeping away the time, that was all she wanted right now. She squeezed more water out of her hair, ignoring it as it splashed to the bathroom floor. Trudging to her room, she froze when she saw Frank sitting on the edge of her bed. He was staring at his hands that rested in his lap. He looked disgusting. Dirty, disheveled, and bleeding from more than one place. She didn't want to think about what was jumping from his body to her mattress. Jeez, Frank, what are you doing here?
Hey, Dandra. You guys left when I got back downstairs.
He still hadn't looked up or even moved. Yeah, Dennis and Max started fighting and I'm just over it. You know you've got a cut. A few, actually. But a big one on your arm. Sure enough, his left arm was slowly leaking blood. Frank glanced at it like he already knew. He just hadn't attempted to...
Oh, sorry, I read it.
He just hadn't attempted to stem the flow or cover it.
Oh yeah, must have fell or something.
He mumbled. No, you were up in Charlie's bad room, drinking and breaking bottles. And if you're done doing that, why don't you go home? I'm really not in the mood for any of you guys right now. Dee walked by him and crawled into bed, pulling the covers up to her neck. Frank stubbornly remained seated.
I know I was never any good as a father.
Dee rolled her eyes. Nope, 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 not having this conversation. No way. Frank kept going as if she hadn't said a word.
Not to you or your brother, and not to Charlie. I should have gotten the blood test.
Jeez, Dee hoped he wasn't crying. He sounded like he might have been, but Dee wasn't about to look. Would it have made any difference?
To him it would have.
Frank sounded so mournful that Dee almost felt sorry for him.
I can't make things right with him now, but I can make it right with you. I can make it right with Dennis. I can try harder.
Dee shot up. Try harder? You never tried at all, you son of a bitch! It doesn't matter if you were Charlie's dad or not. You still treated them better than you ever treated me and Dennis. It is way too late for you to start trying now. I'm a grown woman, and I stopped wanting you to be a good dad years ago. I haven't needed you since I was a kid. It goes for Dennis, too. We don't need a dad anymore. You were never really ours anyway. He was crying. Silent tears slid down his dirty face. Dee refused to take the words back. Not after every Christmas he gleefully ruined. Not after every request she ever made of him that was thrown in her face. Not when he left her crying or scared or hurt without thinking twice about it. Not after he disappeared for years and only popped back up to instantly bond with Charlie. Charlie. Damn it. She didn't want to cry in front of Frank. She'd promised herself she would never again after her freshman year when she'd been laughed out of the homecoming dance and spent the duration of the night shivering by the dumpster. And by the time she sobbed out the story to Frank after he picked her up, he and Dennis had only laughed at her. She laid back down and pulled the blankets over her head. Why couldn't he just leave? Go cry to Dennis. See if he has better luck there. At last, he broke the silence. The desperation in his voice left her torn between anger and pity.
Can't go back to that apartment without him.
Had he even heard a word she'd said? Or was he too wrapped up in his own pain to hear hers?
I'm sorry, Deandra. You never think... I never thought I'd have to do this. I was a kid, you know. You guys, all three of you. No, all four of you. Always supposed to be here after I died. Always.
Damn him. She reached over to grab the other, frequently unused, pillow and tossed it at him. You can't sleep in my bed again. Ever. But you can stay somewhere here. The couch or the floor or wherever. You may not have ever been our dad, but you're still, you know, us. She felt the pressure on the bed ease up. Frank was standing, but she didn't hear any footsteps. She cautiously lifted the covers to peer around the room. She didn't see Frank. She crawled over to the edge. The old man was asleep below the foot of her bed. He was covered with her duvet and curled up around a pillow. Dee sighed and slid back to her own spot on the bed. He was covered with her duvet and curled up around a pillow. Dee sighed and slid back to her own spot on the bed. She grabbed for her flask just as Frank's snores filled the room. Mac was on the couch when Dennis finally came home. It was well past midnight. Mac had been watching old home videos of him and Charlie since before the sun had set. When he left the bar earlier, he'd been furious. At Dennis. At Charlie. At God. He wanted to rage. He wanted to see Charlie. He walked around in the sewer for a while. He thought it would make him feel close to his friend. He spent most of his time wondering what the hell Charlie ever did down there. By the time he got home, half of him hoped that Dennis was already there. He was pissed at him, but he didn't really want to be alone. He had found the apartment dark and empty, resisted the urge to call Dennis, and dug around in his closet until he found a box of old tapes. He smiled watching their younger selves ride their bikes through a pack of stray cats. Charlie's wild laughter echoed through the walls. It was like a vice around him, squeezing the air out of the room. Mac remembered that day. He had waited for Charlie in the smaller boy's kitchen. His mom had forgotten to give him breakfast that morning, and Mrs. Kelly had made him some waffles. He had been happily munching away when Charlie ran downstairs, shaking and crying. He pulled Mac along outside just as his Uncle Jack appeared in the stairwell, waving to them both. Mac didn't ask questions. Just like Charlie never asked why Mac's mom was never around and where his dad was. Instead, they had grabbed their bikes and ridden as far away from Charlie's house as they could get. They rode around and dared each other to do crazy stunts until they were giggling and happy again. And they'd never talked about it. Reynolds, he had Charlie, his only lifelong constant, and he hadn't been there to stop him. Take that last can of spray paint away from him, to wake him up or turn him over when he started to choke. He hadn't even been able to identify him. His legs turned to jelly at the last second, and he sent Dennis in instead. But it should have been him. Charlie was his responsibility. He should have at least gone in and looked at him. He looked back up at the screen as his younger self ordered Charlie to He looked back up at the screen as his younger self ordered Charlie to try and knock him over. The both of them ended up rolling around in a junkyard. Mac felt tears sting his eyes when the taller boy on a screen, when the taller boy on screen pinned Charlie down and declared, "See? See how strong I am? This way no one will mess with us, because I can totally kick everybody's asses." Ugh, damn it, Charlie. Mac pressed his palms to his eyes. He heard the key in the lock and quickly dried his eyes as best he could. Dennis walked in, pad of paper still in his hands. He looked from the TV to Mac. And chose not to comment. "Where the hell have you been, dude?" Dennis held up the pad.
I think I finally got something decent here. Also, funerals are crazy expensive, and so I need to get Frank's credit card before I can make any final arrangements.
Max shrugged. "I have all his card numbers written down. They're in my nightstand. Just use that in the morning. No one's gonna answer in the middle of the night." Mac made room for Dennis on the couch. Dennis took the invitation and joined him. Dennis was freezing. He had his arms tightly folded and his eyes firmly glued to the TV. Mac could tell the man was trying hard not to shiver. "Have you been outside?"
In the park. For a few hours. 6 or so.
Dennis kept his voice flat and still wouldn't look at him. "Jeez, dude, you're probably gonna get sick." Mac pulled the blanket from the back of the couch over Dennis's shoulders and wrapped his arm around him. Dennis stayed tense but allowed Mac to pull him toward him. They sat in silence for a while, staring at the TV. Mac knew it was pointless to ask for an apology. It would only lead to another fight, and Mac didn't have any fight in him. He just felt drained, totally empty. Anyway, he didn't want to drive Dennis away to his room, or worse, out of the apartment, back to North Dakota. He tightened his hold on the other man. He wouldn't survive without him. Not a second time, and definitely not without Charlie around to have fun with. His eyes drifted from the TV to Dennis. Dennis was watching the screen, but Mac didn't think he was really seeing it. The man wasn't even blinking. He just sat frozen against Mac. Mac tilted his head up so that his forehead rested in Dennis's hair. He breathed in the scent of him and shuddered at how much he smelled like home. Mac needed all the home that he could get. "Don't go back to..."
Going anywhere, man.
"I really miss Charlie," he blurted out. Dennis didn't react to that. All he said was,
I know you do.
Mac didn't know what else to say. He just held Dennis until they both fell asleep. Dee pulled at the hem of her dress. She swore when she found a loose thread. It unraveled between her fingers while she tried to get a grip on it to break it free. Shit! The whole dress is falling apart. She reached down with her other hand and forced the black string in two. Dennis was seated at the other end of the bar. He was nursing a scotch and keeping his eye on the glass like it held all the answers. "You ready for this?" Dee went back to her own drink. Dennis nodded.
Of course. People have funerals every day. It's not that big a deal. Most important thing is that you guys keep it together, okay? Don't make a scene.
Dee snorted but didn't respond. Fighting Dennis was the last thing she wanted today. She didn't want today at all. She wanted to skip the whole thing and keep on trying to pretend that it wasn't real. That Charlie was back at his own place or down in the basement hunting rats. She wished he'd thought to bring a jacket. The bar was cold. Or maybe she was just uncomfortable. She pulled her shoulders closer together. She hoped it wouldn't be this cold at the church. Dennis's voice caught her ear. Huh? She asked.
I said, love you, Dee.
Dee's first instinct was to laugh. It wasn't often Dennis handed power over to her like this, and every time he did, she took the opportunity to throw his words back in his face, to make him feel some fraction of the pain and humiliation he was always so quick to put her through. Always so quick to put her through. She studied him. He wasn't looking at her, still engrossed in his glass. She could tell by the way his knuckles were turning white that he had quite the grip on it. She couldn't say she loved him back, even though she guessed she did. She loved him, and she hated him. But if she told him that, then someday that would come back to bite her in the ass. She wasn't prepared to really give him that much. He was in a weak moment right now, but he'd get out of it eventually, and he would always remember if she said it. Dennis didn't forget, and he didn't let go. But she found that she didn't want to kick him now either. He was hunched so far down, if he took another hit right now, he might shrink until he disappeared. So she settled on, okay, I hear you. Dennis nodded and relaxed his grip. That seemed to be the right answer. Mac entering saved the twins from needing to say more. He was wearing a suit. That was something. Unfortunately, he was also wearing the duster.
What the hell is this?
Asked Dennis. The duster, dude! Charlie loved this thing. He would have wanted me to wear it to his funeral. Finally, Dennis turned to look Mac up and down.
You aren't going to be doing anything except sitting there quietly. I'm going to be doing all the talking. If anything, I'm wearing the duster. Take it off.
What? No way! If you wanted it, you should have grabbed it before you left this morning. It's mine today.
You have done nothing through this whole process. You don't deserve the duster. Take it off.
Dennis stood up to face Mac. Mac just pulled the duster tightly around himself so Dennis couldn't grab a hold of it. Dennis yanked at the sleeve. Mac slapped his hand away. Dennis saw red and lunged at him. They both fell to the floor.
Give me the duster.
Dee watched, bemused, as they wrestled and shouted over each other. Mac had Dennis in a headlock while Dennis scratched at his face. You son of a bitch! Mac screamed. You didn't give a shit about the dust until you saw me wearing it. It's mine! It's always been mine! Dennis had managed to wriggle free and was tugging as hard as he could on Mac's right sleeve.
I do too give a shit about the duster. You're not the only one who cares about the goddamn duster.
Dee heard a rip. Both men froze. Sure enough, the duster was torn at the shoulder now. Mac's eyes were wide with shock. Dennis gaped at him. Dee thought better of stepping in now. There was a good chance they were about to murder each other and she'd end up throwing a triple funeral.
Well, great. Now you ruined it.
I ruined it. You're the one that started fighting me over it. Mac pulled himself up and began inspecting how bad it was.
You held on too tight like you do everything and wrecked it.
Dennis stood up too. Mac's breath was coming out in desperate gasps. Geez, now he was gonna cry. She'd gotten enough of that from Frank over the last few days. Max slipped off the duster and gingerly cradled it in his arms. His fingers ran over the rip. His tears began falling onto the torn coat. It's not my fault. It's not. It's yours. And you don't even care. You don't even feel it. Damn it, Dennis. Why don't you just feel it?
I don't know.
Oh, whoa, what the hell is going on here?
Frank suddenly appeared from the office.
What the hell did you two do to the duster? The duster? My voice went up an octave, I'm sorry.
Mac couldn't talk anymore. He kept his mouth closed and tried to suppress the sobs, tried to hold it all back. But the tremble in his arms and the way he held the duster couldn't fool anyone. Dee took pity on him. These two idiots were fighting over who got to wear the stupid coat and they ripped it. Frank looked at the three of them.
Well, nobody's wearing it. We're bearing it with Charlie.
What?
Dennis jumped.
No way!
Frank held his ground.
Yeah, it's the least you guys can do for him. Look at you. Charlie's dead and you're fighting about who gets to look the coolest at the funeral? Charlie's dead. He doesn't care if he's buried.
That's Dennis. That's Dennis.
Okay.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Alright, do it again. Charlie's dead! He doesn't care if he's buried with the duster or not.
Dennis was kind of twitching now. The vein in his forehead was popping out.
Care.
Oh, so now you want to be his dad, is that it? That's not gonna do a goddamn thing for him now, you piece of shit!
I'll do it for him. Mac piped up. His voice was wavering badly. You're right, Dennis. I've just been drinking and crying and not doing anything. I'll give Charlie the duster. He walked up to Frank and held it out. Frank accepted it without a word. Mac let his hand linger over the torn garment before turning toward the door. He held it open and looked at the other three expectantly.
Yeah, we're gonna be late.
Dennis suddenly seemed calm as he exited Patty's. Frank followed Dennis to the Range Rover. Dee was last, and she was a little surprised that Mac kept the door open for her. She was even more surprised when she felt his hand on the small of her back. The four of them sat in the front. Mrs. Kelly was in the second row of her brother and Mrs. Mac. Frank was on the end next to Dee. He gripped her knee, looking for support anywhere he could get it. Dee accepted the touch with no comment. She had her head on Dennis's shoulder. He, too, didn't fight the contact. Mac was on the other side of Dennis, but they weren't touching. They were both stiff and making sure they wouldn't accidentally brush against one another. Mac had his arms folded and his eyes on a closed casket. It was a simple thing. Or it would be if Mrs. Kelly had insisted on draping it with flowers. Mac was certain Charlie wouldn't want that. He was certain Charlie wouldn't want any of this. Charlie probably wanted to be tossed in the dumpster behind Patty's, or walled inside the basement. Mac could almost remember Charlie talking about it once, but he'd been too drunk to remember. Dennis checked his Dennis checked his watch and then stood up. He brushed away invisible wrinkles on his suit before approaching the pulpit. He looked at Frank and then at Dee. He avoided Mac's gaze. He pulled out a sheet of paper from his jacket. His hands were perfectly steady as he began to read.
So, thank you all for coming. It's a great day for a funeral, am I right? Okay. I've known Charlie since we were classmates in high school together. We later transitioned to business partners when we bought Patty's Pub with our friend Mac. Uh, he's here today. Anyway, I like to think that I taught Charlie a lot. Actually, during our friendship, he often displayed the potential to make me very proud. I believe he would have gotten there at some point if he hadn't died. Charlie had a unique approach to work in life. He was not afraid to get his hands dirty, or any other part of him. He was actually kind of gross. He was very gross, okay? He was disgusting, and illiterate, and insane, and fascinating, manipulative. He definitely picked that up from me. He was funny, and he was gone. He's gone. Oh, shit. I think I'm starting to feel it. He's really dead. I saw him. He looked horrible. Jesus, there's rats on the floor. Who's gonna... God damn it!
Then Mac was there, at his side. He laid a hand on Dennis's arm and pulled him to him. Dennis fell into the embrace and gripped him back as tight as he could. Mac wrapped his arms around Dennis, and Dennis grabbed hold of Mac's jacket and buried his face in his chest. He squeezed his eyes shut and tried to get his breathing under control before he did something stupid, like cry. Mac didn't say anything. He just held him. Eventually, Frank walked by them and placed a duster on top of the coffin. He turned and joined Mac and Dennis in their embrace. Dee stepped up last. She hesitated for a moment before Mac and Frank parted to make room for her. She walked into their waiting arms and pulled the two as close as she could. Dennis still had his face pressed into Mac's jacket.
I want to go back to the bar now.
Dennis's voice was thick and rough. Mac shook his head. We gotta finish this first. It's almost over. I got you. I got you guys. They made it through the day. None of them could remember much of how they made it, but they did. All they could say was that Mac had somehow corralled them from the funeral home to the cemetery. He'd kept his arms around the twins as Charlie's coffin was lowered into the ground. At one point, Frank had to stop Bonnie from jumping in after it. Mac forced himself to watch it all. The coffin descend, fresh dirt falling on top of it. He watched until Charlie was gone. At last, the priest stopped talking. They were released and retreated back to the bar. Mac got everyone a beer, but nobody drank. They just sat in miserable silence, staring at their untouched bottles.
You know, I had about 3 more pages in the eulogy.
I think what you said was perfect. Mac clapped him on the shoulder.
Of course it was, but if you'd just given me a moment, would have gotten it out.
Dennis, relax. It's over. It's done. Dee took his hand in her own. I just want to say that me and Charlie, sometimes, we made a pretty good team.
Yeah, sometimes.
Dennis conceded, squeezing her hand back. Even so, Dee continued, I'm pissed at him for all this.
You pissed? Me too. I mean, we lost a duster over this. This last week has been awful. Truly terrible. It's all his fault.
Max sighed. I'm actually glad you guys said that because I am super pissed at Charlie right now. This whole thing has me all screwed up. Like, this is the worst thing he's ever done to us.
Definitely. I had plans this week. That's ruined. We went through all this trouble to bury the kid, and what do we get for it?
Not a damn thing! Dee was shouting now. I can't believe how selfish he was. Did he even stop to think about the rest of us? He never did. Mac's eyes were flooding again. That son of a bitch. It's like there's this empty space now. Like right beside me all the time. Like right beside me all the time, and he should be there. And I hate him for it. The twins began talking over each other to agree with Mac. Frank watched them all spur each other's anger on. He watched Mac's face go red as he rubbed his eyes dry. He watched the veins in Dennis's neck bulge. Dee's squawking reached ultrasonic levels. He felt no rage. All he felt was lost and guilty. He thought about slipping out, but he still couldn't bring himself to go back to his place.
He was my buddy.
They all turned toward Frank. He was looking down again. Like he was afraid to...
Sorry, I always jumped the gun.
He was looking down again, like he was afraid the admission would cost him something.
And maybe my son. But he was my buddy. And that's what matters.
The others stilled.
He was a foundation. And now what do we got?
He finished. Dennis put his hands on Mac and Dee's shoulders.
Still got each other. And Charlie, you know. Charlie will always be us. Always part of the gang.
I'm getting rid of the apartment. You guys can come over and see if there's anything you want first. Otherwise, I'm gonna burn that place to the ground.
Okay, you're already staying with me anyway. You might as well keep staying. He shrugged.
Yeah, I think I will.
Dennis looked at Mac. Mac stared back at him with pleading eyes. This sucked. It all sucked. He didn't want to have Mac moping around forever. He wanted to see some fight back in his sister. He couldn't have Frank fading away from them and taking his money with him. He wanted Charlie to walk through the door. He wanted things to be normal again. They never would be, but he could try to get them close.
Oh, you guys want to come back to our place? Cuddle up? Sing a song?
Max smiled. It was small, but it was genuine. The first genuine one he'd seen since Dennis had confirmed for them that Charlie was gone. Dee looked surprised. Frank eyed him warily. Max spoke for him. Charlie would have loved to. Frank stood up.
Let's go. I'll drive.
Dennis grinned.
Remember your harmonies. Old Town Philly's back again.
That is the end.
All I can really say is like, Jesus Christ, that was depressing as hell.
It is. I will say I don't know. As a fan of the show, and I know Nova, you said you used to watch it at least back when you had FXX.
Well, at least any sort of way to watch it. I think I might still be able to watch.
It's on Hulu.
Might still be able to watch it without necessarily streaming, but I'm not sure. But in only a few episodes.
Yeah. I'm sorry for cutting you off. As a fan of the show, this was really jarring to read, and that is not to say that it's bad. It's weird. I would say everyone was in character, but I cannot see this being an episode of the show, is probably the best way to put it.
See, that's interesting for me, because this has been like my first and only introduction to these characters, so I don't have that background.
I will say it is weird. I feel like it is interesting because no one is out of character, but it is tonally just night and day with the show. Well, the show's had its dramatic moments. The show does put a lot of emphasis on the fact that the gang are... It's weird because the gang both care for each other a lot more than they do anyone else. I would say they care for each other more than they care for anyone who isn't a member of the gang.
Mm.
Even though they do backstab each other and scream at each other and usually wind up bickering or conspiring against each other.
Yeah.
There is a part of them that do genuinely like each other in a way, and it's almost in a codependent way. It is almost that they are forced to sort of be with each other because nobody else would accept them. And I do have to say, I think Frank, it was really interesting, and I kind of wish I had given a better performance. I say that all the time. One, I was having trouble staying on voice, and maybe it was hard for me to really convey this because it is such a rarity for a character like Frank Reynolds to express remorse for anything. But it's not out of character. There are a ton of scenes in the show where, and again, Charlie is kind of their foundation. Because he's the sort of, well, he's almost just collectively their son.
Mm.
And granted, they are probably very abusive parents towards him, but, you know, he's a misguided child, almost.
Mm.
And Frank was interesting here because it is the very few times it's one of the few times we see Frank being an actual father, or at least beating himself up that he wasn't one. And if you don't know, in the show, Frank and Charlie are roommates.
Okay.
And they do have a lot of subplots together. And those subplots they're almost cute. It's almost in a fucked up Always Sunny sort of way. It is almost cute to see how well Frank and Charlie get along. And I think it's just because they complement each other.
Mm.
Because Charlie is too dumb to care about anything, and Frank is too frank to care about anything.
Nice. That's pretty good.
And it is interesting seeing Frank put into a scenario where he's forced to care about something for once. No, I really do like it. There are a few callbacks and references to the show itself. And it's such an easy dark fic trope to be like, let's take this thing played for laughs and now play it dramatically, because a lot of the scenes referenced here were initially played for laughs, as you can imagine.
Mm.
Yeah, like Mac and Charlie's disturbing childhoods.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, yes.
Go ahead, sorry.
Someone who has not seen a single episode of the show but has like seen commercials and gifs. Yeah, I think they got the general vibe of it. Like, even when like the I guess is a dark fic, but yeah, like X character dying and the rest of the characters reacting. That's just a standard trope in fiction. And it's no exception for fan fiction.
Yeah, I feel like this
But
is arguably the darkest.
The fact that the writer had enough... I'm sorry, you go ahead, I interrupted.
No, I was just gonna say, I feel like this is probably the darkest story we've read at this point.
And I feel like it'd be something if you were 14 and wrote this and wanted to write a quote-unquote emotional Always Sunny fic. It would be very easy to just make them behave out of character and completely remove the cynicism that really is just in the show's DNA. But I
Yeah.
do like that even with this playing it more dramatically and being more sincere, it still feels. I mean, the way it ends, they're all just like, God fucking damn it, Charlie, you fucking idiot. Which
That's what
is
I was getting at.
yeah, that's probably the only way I can think of ending this scene. I will also say that the character voices are mwah, just perfect, especially the Duster scene. The Duster fight, that is just a scene from the show.
Oh my. Yeah, like this is obviously a sad story, but the Always Sunny cast is still the Always Sunny cast. This is about as realistic as they would. This is about the most realistic way I could see them handling a loss of one of their own.
I do like that they still retained. Dennis isn't necessarily as comically sociopathic in this as he is, but he is still just as manipulative and obsessive compulsive as he is in the show.
Yeah, I can see he has possession issues.
Oh yeah. No, he's a
Uh,
control freak, especially around Dee, because Dee is his sister, and there are several jokes where he basically he I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. He revolves around Dee. He does hover over her a lot in a way that is obviously toxic.
oh my gosh.
And I think it's because, well, no, they just grew up together, and he's basically just been controlling her his whole life.
Lovely.
No, I liked it. I liked it a lot, and I also do like how Mac is handled in this. Essentially, while still being Mac, because Mac is the closest one to a person, the closest thing I can think of to a genuinely sane person in the show, but that is entirely relative. But because everyone else is clearly mentally ill, and Mac is too. There's the entire arc of him being fat, and him taking that really personally, and his repressed homosexuality, his fundamentalism. But he's also the one who's most likely to. This is especially noticeable in, I think, Nova. You know the implication scene. I think that speaks volumes. That Mac is like, wait, what are you saying here? I realize if you haven't seen the show, you probably don't know what I'm referencing, but the point I'm trying to make is that it handles Mac's character in a way where, like, Mac is a relative voice of reason, almost. Even though he is too stupid to actually be one, in much the same way that Charlie is.
Well, it was certainly an experience reading this, and I actually quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. As someone who has like no reference point for these characters, I thought this was entertaining.
I will say, I think the best bit. I will say also, Nova. I am so glad I guest cast you with Dennis. You did amazing.
That's what I'm here for.
And no, I can say that even though I could never see this being an episode of the show, I can see this playing out in this way.
Yeah. I'll take your word for it.
And what's weird, even though you've never seen the show, I imagine you've seen clips.
Maybe?
Yes.
I mean, me specific.
Despite you having an Adam's apple, Scrappy, you played D really well.
Oh dear. Like I enjoyed I enjoyed the whispering. Oh,
I'm sorry, I cut you off, Harry. What were you trying to say?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't think I was really saying much.
I think the last thing he said was that he might have seen clips of this show like in years
Oh,
past.
no, yeah, I mean, if I did or not, I wouldn't be able to know.
I would say you'd have to have at least seen a few clips of Frank, because Frank, Dennis, and Charlie are easily like the most mimetic characters.
I mean, if you show me like screenshots, or something, I might be able to tell you, but
What did you say, Tanner?
I was gonna
That
say,
what?
the most memorable Frank moment is probably like the trash man,
I've probably seen a clip of that. Like,
where he invents a wrestling persona and is playing the role of a heel, and it's a dude who throws garbage onto the ring and eats it.
nice.
And everyone's just like, Dennis is like, oh yeah, no, the troops are, because they're putting on a wrestling show for the troops. I forget which military they were doing it for, but Dennis essentially goes like, oh no, that's great, Frank. That's what the troops are gonna want to see, a 60-year-old man eating trash.
oh dear. Like, I was trying to think of what I actually have. I think a GIF of like the Flipadelphia stuff. Yeah. No context, but I've seen a GIF.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as someone who's never actually seen an episode, this is an interesting take on the inner psyches of these utter lunatics.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't mind being a more traditional, Always Sunny story, but I'd probably have to get myself familiarized with the characters to hone my performance.
I did find one called The Gang Stormed the Capitol, but I chose not to do that one. And
Yeah.
that one was written as a script, as if it were an episode of the show.
I mean, if there's one thing I can say about this that I appreciate is that I enjoyed being one that had like no knowledge of the series in question, or the source material. Yeah, so it was interesting being on like that side for a change.
Yeah, and
Cause,
again, I
yeah.
feel like we could have done a better Frank, but I guess it's because this is the least Frank I have ever seen him act. Because,
to be frank, you were a good Frank.
Oh my god.
Yeah, he's usually, you know, he usually is just kind of excited. He rolls along with whatever the gang is doing. And, you know, if they want to do a scheme, he's got the money to fund it. He doesn't give a shit. If they want to build a rocket to the moon? Shit, I can get the glass for the windows. I've got the fuel. And also,
why do you have rocket fuel?
Rockets explode.
Is nebulously good, I guess. I don't know.
It's fine. It also works as a Gilbert Gottfried impression, so I'm going to keep that in mind.
No, and that was upsetting me, is that it flipped into Gottfried. It's not a good impression.
But the combination is what makes it funny.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I've done better. But I say that every episode.
Yeah.
Does anyone else want to go? I feel like I have mostly been leading, and I would like to hear the thoughts of. I mean, you've touched on it, but do you want to add anything like more holistic? I guess either Nova, well, any of you.
Well, it was a well-written story. I just enjoyed the diction and grammar of it. Like, it's and I don't mean this as like boilerplate praise. I'm legitimately happy when a story is just well constructed in terms of syntax.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I can't judge that because I didn't see the text, but
I've turned in a myriad of papers where I will look over it. It's weird because I'll run it through Grammarly like 6 times, but then somehow, what usually happens is I'll run it through Grammarly, then I'll get up and go do something, and this is just emblematic of my attention deficit problems. I'll get up and go do something, assume I already retyped it through Grammarly because I haven't actually paid for Grammarly Premium to run through the entire article, so I'm copy pasting every sentence through it. And I'll assume I already did the Grammarly version and put it in, and then I look, oh, I didn't, and I've already sent in the paper.
oof, that sucks.
But no, it is very well structured and well written. And again, even as you mentioned, even the narrator is a bit snarky in this.
Yeah.
It did seem to be well written from what I could tell.
And as a fan of the show, I have very weird opinions on fan service because I always appreciate it when it's done well. But
Yeah.
no, I think the obvious thing is when it is there, fan service does not a good story make. But the
Yeah.
callback here did serve a purpose. And there were moments where it made me smile.
Yeah, who's Bonnie?
Bonnie was, now keep in mind, it's been a bit. And if I don't, I swear to God, if she's a major character and I just forget, that's gonna be I'm gonna feel really stupid. I guess the most is that, hold on. I will look that up later. I'm gonna feel really stupid if it's a character I should know. But then again, that show has so many one-off characters. Rickety Cricket. Well, Rickety Cricket's not one-off. He's recurring. I'm sorry. I'll have to look that up later.
Oh, Bonnie. I'm checking the wiki. Bonnie is just Charlie's mom.
That's what I thought. I just didn't want to answer that in case I was wrong.
Yeah,
so
I believe that.
I did know who she was. I was just afraid that I got it wrong. Story of my life.
No, I can be like that sometimes too.
No, Nova, did you have any thoughts?
And this was kind of more downtrodden than I was expecting for Fic, even knowing that it was about Charlie being dead and everyone else reacting to it. Though at the very least, from what I do remember the show, yeah, everyone's pretty much on character. There's definitely were some pretty good moments. You didn't hear it, but I did at least chuckle a little bit, and I did smile a few times.
I was losing it at the Blazers. I was losing it at the Duster, not Blazer. Duster scene and the ending because it was like, no, I can see, I can envision this as a scene in the show.
I haven't even seen the show, and it felt right.
Yeah, something about the writing for the characters here just felt correct.
Yeah, and again, if they were to kill anyone and play it dramatically, it would be Charlie.
So for that, I can only take your word for it.
Charlie only because he's on his face. On paper, the nicest of the five.
Yeah, but he has a creepy obsession with the waitress and is a drug addict and an alcoholic. And also, I also like that even though we never get to see it, I like, and this makes perfect sense that Dennis would respect, because there are several scenes in the show that imply that Charlie is some kind of idiot savant, and is somehow can actually outperform Dennis when it comes to being like this manipulative chess master. And I really love when they play that up. Or the best scene is when they have a scene where they're trying to come up with a jingle for the bar, and everybody's like, oh god, Charlie's just gonna do a song about like rape and spiders or something.
Oh my
Spiders.
And he winds up doing this like really good Randy Newman-esque show tune. And they're all like surprised, and then they lock him in the basement and steal the tune for themselves.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And then when everything starts going to shit, they bring him back, hoping that, you know, that'll be their failsafe is Charlie's song. But he just comes out and starts screeching about rape and spiders and ghouls.
Yeah.
Why the spiders?
Charlie's weird. The rape is obvious.
Yeah, that's obviously bad. So spiders is just making me like, wait, what?
Spooders.
That might be because he's a man-child.
He hunts rats apparently, so that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Oh yeah, he's an exterminator who really enjoys killing rats. To the point where I forget if this is true. I think part of the joke is that they don't even pay him for it. He just kind of likes doing it.
Well.
Yeah, that's not a telltale sign of some possible problems at all.
Oh no, Charlie.
Okay.
Charlie, again, the savant side of his character. People have theorized. There's fan theories that he was actually like brilliant and was really smart, but childhood trauma, falling in with the wrong crowd, and brain damage from all the drugs and alcohol turned him into what he is.
Oh dear. What a show.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Well, if everyone else is still lucid, then we can either end or we can just move on to another story for tonight.
I have a few things to do, and also dinner is on the way.
Alright
I'm
then,
fine.
we can cut this off tonight.
Yeah,
Alright.
that's fine. So it's hour 13. That's not too bad.
Alright then, well, until next time, this has been Storytime with Scrappy and Friends. We bid you all a good night.
Yep, and see you later.